看得见大家，今天又看不见了。
这个中间有一块黑黑的。
Yeah， 对，我如果要看有些什么人，就是说我 full screen，它就会停在那里，你们就会看到是黑的。我把它关掉就算了。But I really want to see myself. I don't know how. I've been seeing myself for the past few times, but not anymore. Okay. Because I'm wearing a t-shirt, I thought it would be very informal, but it seems like you don't see the rest of my arms, so that's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. We're having a heat wave today, I suppose. It's very rare for us. A few days ago, it was very, very cold. You wouldn't believe it was summer, but suddenly it heats up. I'm waiting for 2 more minutes.
Okay. A lot of places that have record-breaking temperatures.
Yeah, especially in United Kingdom.
Yes.
And Europe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the fire, it's horrible.
Yeah. Having a cough drop in my mouth. I really am much better now, but I thought just to prevent myself from coughing, I would try this.
Don't know why the cough, right? What brings up?
I don't know. It's just some kind of a cold or flu. It's definitely not COVID-19.
That's good.
Yeah. But it was really serious and lasted a long, long time. Usually when I have a cold, which I rarely do, it lasts at most a week, but this time it's like 5 weeks.
Wow.
There was nothing else, just coughing and coughing. But because I was
maybe it's allergic to something.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, that's a possibility. Sometimes I do feel my coughing was related to allergy, but well, I'm sorry. We're live streaming. I should not be talking about myself.
Oh, we live streaming already? Okay.
Yeah, she started live streaming. I hope
I'm sorry. Okay, then I'm going.
Yeah, my clock. Okay, it's 2:00. Let me take a look. Let's just start with this. I'm going to talk about something not so much related to the course material, so that other people can catch up and sign on. Okay. This is the first slide I always show, which is that my class is called the English Conversation on King On channel. It's every month, the first and the third Wednesday, and they do live stream on YouTube, and the recording will be again after it's over, put on YouTube channel so that people can see it. I just randomly picked the English Conversation as the topic or the name of the class, but it's not really conversation because you need to talk to me to make it a conversation. So I really welcome people to talk to me, please. And I just imagine that people watch my class because they wanted to sharpen up their English speaking and reading and so on. And the secret to learning any language, if I may say so, because I'm not an expert at all, I think the secret is in practice. You have to do it again and again and again. So we, being Chinese in a different country, we cling on to our original language. So it's difficult for us to assimilate into this foreign culture without learning a lot about their language. Because language is not just to communicate, it's also part of your very being. You are what you are because you know different languages and different knowledges. That would matter a lot to you. So if you want to practice your English, in my opinion, the best way is to read a lot and speak a lot. And as someone living here in a different country, I would suggest that you rely on their news and their YouTube. So if you watch a lot of videos on YouTube that speaks the English language, then that would help you a great deal. So right now I'm trying to get you interested in going on to YouTube to watch some free movies. For one thing, these movies are wonderful movies. It's worth your while to spend some time spending maybe 2 hours or so, watching a great movie that will widen your horizon. Horizon is Horizon, which means 地平线. The line, you look out into the open field, and the line between the sky and the earth is called the horizon. So if something widens your horizon, that it will expand the field that you're living in, your knowledge, and so on and so forth. So it's always good to learn something more. And if you watch a movie, even if just once a week, and I don't know what that is, but I should again keep my phone under a pillow so that it doesn't make any more noise. That's because I don't know how to turn that sound off yet, because it's relatively a new phone. And I, being one of the older people, we are just struggling to catch up with this modern technology. Okay, let me come back to the what I was talking about. It's about a movie, and this time I chose a really good old movie, and it's short, only 1 hour and 36 minutes, and it's called The Pygmalion. You can say Pygmalion, you can say Pygmalion. In fact, lots of the words I checked today for pronunciation, it turns out that they all have different ways. People who consider themselves an expert in pronunciation would put their version on YouTube, and not all of them pronounce it the same way. And for this word, you can say Pygmalion or Pygmalion. And it doesn't matter too much since it was not an English word. It is a Greek word, and it's a person's name. So it's not necessarily something you really need to pronounce correctly. And this is a poster of this movie called The Pygmalion. And here we have a big star in the middle of the poster, and his name is on the upper right corner. His name is Leslie Howard. So in this movie, even though there were quite a number of actors and actresses playing in it, he is the dominating figure in this movie, and he's played by Leslie Howard. Pygmalion is the 1938 British film based on the 1913 George Bernard Shaw play of the same name, and adopted by him meaning GBS, George Bernard Shaw. And right now, you can see the middle name Bernard. And when I checked, you can say Bernard In fact, there are more people pronouncing it as Bernard, but there are also a few who would say Bernard. And there are many other similar pronunciations. So that's up to you to decide how you're going to pronounce. So George Bernard Shaw is the person named as him at in the last line. It was adapted by him for the screen. So he wrote the screenplay. I mean, he wrote the stage play called The Pygmalion, which was a great success. And a movie was in the planning, and the people who were producing this movie asked him to write a screenplay, to write this script for the movie. So that's what he did. However, he probably, I'm quite sure he probably never wrote a screenplay before. And making a movie is a big business, by which I mean it involves a lot of money. So there are many people who wanted to make sure that the movie would sell well. So if they hire somebody who has never in his life written a screenplay, they want people who know how to write a screenplay to help him. So even though we say Mr. Shaw wrote the screenplay, there were three other people. Together, there were four people named as the script writer for this film. So that's something interesting right there. And I have this picture, which is just very, very good picture. I like it so much because we have seen the movie My Fair Lady. I myself, I watched it, I don't know, maybe 5 times, and I know every song in it. And the thing that pops your mind immediately is the opening scene, which is exactly the same as the one in the play and in the first movie. This 1938 movie was the first movie made from this play, Pygmalion. So in the middle, we have Leslie Howard, a very, very confident, smart professor in phonetics. He studies language and the pronunciation and all the things about it. And he was in front of the opera house in Covent Garden. And the opera was over, and the people were coming out of the opera, all very high class, rich, sophisticated people. And the woman on the right was played by Wendy Hiller. She plays Eliza Doolittle, who was a poor, uneducated flower girl trying to sell small bunches of flowers to these people streaming out of the opera house, and it was raining quite hard, and she was trying to make a few bucks in the very late of the night. When the opera is over, it's usually at least 10 o'clock in the afternoon, if not 11 or 12. You could guess who was on the left of the picture, and that was Colonel Pickering. He also is a high-class scholar coming back from India. You know, India was the jewel in the crown of Victorian England. So he came here because he wanted to meet a certain Professor Higgins so that they could discuss some topics about phonetics or about language and the use of them. And they happened to meet right here by chance, because Professor Higgins was trying, as he always does, to record people's accent and pronunciation so that he could study. As we learned from the story, he could just listen to anyone in London speaking English and name the place he was born or he lived within a few blocks. He knows hundreds of different nuances in this pronunciation. So he's really an expert in this field. And he was trying to write down what he heard the flower girl was saying to other people, because it has a very distinct accent. And as it happens, that's how he met Colonel Pickering, who came from India just so that he could go visit Professor Higgins, and they did not know each other. So I like this picture very, very much, because you can see how the three of them met. That started the story. And the story is that Professor Higgins, in his supreme confidence, decided to wager a bet with Colonel Pickering that he could, within a few months, teach this flower girl who spoke such terrible English, and he could just teach this girl in a few months and pass her off as a princess. That's how good he was, and he was very confident that he would do it. The film was a financial and a critical success. When we talk about the success of a movie, we talk about financial and a critical success. These are the most important two aspects of the success of a movie. It either sells a lot of tickets or it gathers a lot of critical acclaim, or both, or neither. So for a movie to succeed, you want it to sell well and you want the critics to like it. And the two things usually don't go together because, as we know, 下里巴人 and the 阳春白雪 are two different things. 阳春白雪 means critically acclaimed piece of art, while 下里巴人 is wowing the general public who do not have good taste. So financial and critical success are two different things, and here they come together in this movie, because not only did it sell a lot of tickets, but all the critics praised that it was a good quality film. And it won an Oscar for Best Screenplay. As I just mentioned, it's 4 Oscars for 4 people, because there were 4 people who worked on this screenplay. And so this movie did win 1 big Oscar for Best Screen, but it was nominated for many other categories, including Best Picture, Best Actor, and the Best Actress. So Leslie Howard and Wendy Hiller both were nominated for Oscar, along with the movie itself. 3 of those nominations did not net any award, because it's very hard to actually win an Oscar. So right now we always consider being nominated as a mark of good quality in certain respect. So we know that George Bernard Shaw got an Oscar for it, which is very rare, because what I mean is, of all the Oscar awards for Best Screenplay, George Bernard Shaw was the only one who won a Nobel Prize. We have many people working in the movie industry. They would win an Oscar or win a Tony Award or an Emmy Award or even a Grammy Award. So these are the 4 big entertainment awards. And for some people to win 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 of those awards, you can consider they are really, really good in their business. And there is a word for people who achieve that, and we call that EGOT, E-G-O-T, which means Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and the Tony. So if a person won 4, each one of those awards, you can say that they are the very, very best in the movie or in the entertainment business. So for George Bernard Shaw to be getting a good award, which is an Oscar, it should be a great honor, but he could not care less because he thinks he is so much better than what Oscar could bring to him. He thinks that Oscar is being honored if he accepts this award, while other people think Oscar honoring him, he should feel it's a great honor, but he doesn't. The screenplay later was adapted into the 1956 theatrical musical, My Fair Lady. So I just mentioned My Fair Lady had the same story based on the same play that Shaw wrote, which in turn led to the 1964 film. So there was the play first, then there was this movie that we're going to talk about today. And after that, there was a musical, which was played all over the places, including Broadway and many high school auditoriums would play. I've seen some before, yeah. And the last one would be the movie. The movie was the stage musical that was adapted into a movie. So there were 4 levels of adaptation. Shaw's reaction to his award was, "It's an insult for them to offer me any honor." Everyone who received an Oscar would say, "Oh, thank you, it's a great honor." But not Shaw. He said, "It's an insult for them to offer me any honor, as if they had never heard of me before. They offer me an honor means that they are throwing me something that I should be grateful for, but it's the other way around." And he said, as if they've never heard of me before. And it's very likely they never have, which means that he thinks that these people are so uneducated, they probably really have never heard of me, who was so extremely well-known and famous and accomplished. And these people are throwing me a little award trying to get my gratitude. This is just an insult to me. He, being a very sarcastic person, he is always saying things that are very, very entertaining. Here he says, "They might as well send some honor to George for being King of England." And this George is, of course, King George III of England, when America declared independence from England. He thinks that his getting an Oscar is like some people giving King George III an honor for being the king of England. It's just so laughable. And there's another place I read about this thing. They think that Shaw getting an Oscar makes him very sexy, while Oscar giving an award to Shaw makes them appear very classy, 就是提高他们的身价 In this relationship of Oscar offering Shaw an Oscar, it's an act that makes Shaw very sexy because he is very well respected and by extension, not very entertaining. But he now is appreciated by the entire movie industry, so it makes him appear very sexy. On the other hand, the Academy, American AFI, American Film Institute, by giving the very respected George Bernard Shaw an award, makes them look like they are very high class. Okay, and there's another way people use these two words is for Ginger and Fred and Ginger. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, they are a great pair dancing together in many, many popular movies. And they say that Ginger Rogers makes the couples very sexy, very attractive together. On the other hand, Fred Astaire makes the couple very classy. Fred Astaire looks very high class, so when they dance together, they look like a very classy pair. This is the sexy and the classy and high class. So Shaw is the only winner of both an Oscar and the Nobel Prize. And his friend, meaning Shaw's friend, Mary Pickford, who was a silent movie star, a beautiful girl called Mary Pickford. She later reported that when she went to visit Shaw's home and she saw the award, Oscar was, we usually say, on the mantelpiece. On the mantelpiece means on top of the shelf in front of a fireplace. That's called the mantelpiece. So it appears that Mr. Shaw is happy to have received that award, despite everything that he said. That's very insulting to Oscar. He still considers having an Oscar in his home is something worth being proud of. Okay, now let's come back to the title of this movie. It's called The Pygmalion, and I have talked about it in one of the previous classes. Being not having a very good filing system, I could not find which class I had this, so I had to do everything from scratch. I do note some of the important topics in my class, other than the two main pieces of songs or poem, but I cannot name everything in that class, so I couldn't find this one. So Pygmalion is from Greek mythology, which means 希腊神话. You can say Greek myths, myths, or you can say Greek mythology. They both mean the whole of Greek myth that form a body of artwork or religious concept. And this is not really a religion, but it's just some folk stories about imaginary people who are God or gods. in this mythology, there were many, many people and many magical events. And here we have a person whose name is Pygmalion. He was a king and a sculptor in Cyprus. Cyprus is an island in Mediterranean Sea, just south of Turkey. And because it's close to Turkey and to Greece, it's occupied by people from these two countries. And this country is split into two. The northern part belongs to Turkey, and not really belong to. The northern part, the people were from Turkey, and the southern part, those people were from Greece, and they form a country which is split ethnically. So this king, Pygmalion, was a king and a sculptor in Cyprus, and that was a long time ago. So we know that, like Homer wrote Iliad and Odyssey. Those are the two great epic poems about all these gods, many of the stories, but it's mainly about their involvement and ordinary common people who were involved in the Trojan War. So the two Homer epics were about the Trojan War, while there are many other stories written by other people that are also about Greek mythology. And this one is mainly from Ovid's narrative poem, Metamorphosis. We talked about this before too. Metamorphosis means changing shape. So Ovid's big book about metamorphosis is comprised of hundreds of stories from Greek mythology that were all about changing in shape. For example, Apollo becomes a lover of ordinary common people, or Cupid and lots of people. They are gods, so they could change their shape. And in this story, this is about mythology, about Pygmalion, who is an ordinary person. By that I mean he's not a god, but he sculpted a girl figure in this picture. This sculpture was from a much later artist, but depicting the whole story. And on the right-hand side, kneeling down was Pygmalion, while the girl standing was a statue, not a real person. It's a statue that Pygmalion sculpted, and immediately he fell in love with this girl and he wanted to marry her. So he prayed to, depending on which version you read, it's a god of love. So it could be Cupid, who is right there in this picture, or in some stories, he prayed to Aphrodite or to Venus. Those are goddess of love. And he prayed and prayed, and one day he came home and this sculpture becomes a live person. And this girl is called the Galatea. And he eventually married Galatea, and that's his whole story. And the magical thing about it is that one goddess made this sculpture alive, so he could, so his love could be fulfilled. So Shaw picked this name as the title of his play, because he thinks that Henry Higgins, the professor, is like Pygmalion. He created this ordinary, uneducated flower girl and made her into an exquisitely beautiful and elegant woman who he could bring to the ball, and everyone would say, that must be a princess because she is so well behaved and beautiful and speaks so beautifully with no accent. So Pygmalion is describing the name of the title of the movie is used to describe this professor who created a perfect woman all by himself out of a very dirty and ugly and foul-mouthed woman into a beautiful lady. Okay. Galatea later becomes Pygmalion's wife. Wow, so that's a story. And we have Anthony Asquith and Leslie Howard, two people as the directors. So Leslie Howard, at the peak of his career, he was writing and he was acting, he was directing and producing. He was doing a lot of different jobs in the movie business. And he was the reigning box office, how do I say that? We say he's a hit or a darling of the audience at that time. And for the screenplay, we had 4 people winning this award, with George Bernard Shaw as the leading person. And if you go read the script, it is almost identical to this script. And if you watched My Fair Lady, it was almost identical to the original play. We'll talk about Rex Harrison later, so that's a story for later. And this movie was based on a play written by G.B. Shaw, starring Leslie Howard and Wendy Hiller. And they were in a different era. This movie was in 1938, and that was almost 10 years before I was born. And I reckon that most of the people in my classroom were born after this movie was made, almost all of us. And here, I usually don't list the editor's name, but here this movie was edited by David Lean. I read a lot about David Lean, who was the director of many great movies, starting from Great Expectations and Oliver Twist, all the way to,
Lawrence.
Yes, Lawrence of Arabia, and who was that? Trevor Howard and Sarah Miles in that, Ryan's Daughter, and Bridge on River Kwai. Yeah, Bridge on River Kwai. They say Kwai, Kwai is pronounced Kwai, 贵河大桥. Anyway, he went on to make many of the very, very top of the movies. A Passage to India. But when he started out, he was working as an editor, and many of the good movies in that time were edited by him, and he considered himself first an editor, and he thinks that his editing is essential for him to become a good director. That's why I added his name here. So of all these people, of course, Shaw was very, very famous, but not in the movie industry. And Leslie Howard was at the top of his career at that time. And this director was very famous as well, but this being a very old movie, I did not see many of his movies. And when I read about him, he was a suffering gay person. Yeah, there were a lot of artistically talented artists who were gay, but at that time they were not openly gay, and they suffer a great deal, and they are really mentally suffering very much. So he directed a lot of good movies that were agonizingly painful to watch, you may say that. And also he worked a lot with Terence, what was that? Yeah, okay. Terence Ratigan. Terence Ratigan was another, it's a screenwriter, a playwright, and he was also gay, and they together, the two of them, they produced or they created a lot of wonderful English movies or plays. To begin with, those were plays. Later on, they became movies, and one of them was Winslow Boy, and there are many others too. Okay, so we move on to Anthony Asquith, and some of the boys' movies I have not seen, but the Winslow Boy is very famous, and it's very much an English movie about a person's honor representing more than anything else. You have to fight for your honor. This is about a schoolboy being dismissed for small petty theft in middle school, and the family went to court to sue the school for not for wrongly accuse this boy. And this Anthony Asquith, the director, he also made all these movies that not all of them are well known right now, but he was quite successful at that time. One of his movie was called The Importance of Being Earnest. That was one of Oscar Wilde's play, and it was quintessentially English, and it was remade into many movies, and I have seen at least 2 or 3 of them, and not this one. So this Oscar Wilde was very famous in Chinese. We would call him Wang. He was brilliant when he came to United States, and he went through the custom office, and the people at the custom office asked him, "Do you have anything to declare?" And he famously said, "I have nothing to declare but my genius," because he knows that he is a genius, and everybody should acknowledge that he is a genius. And there's no qualm about it. Everybody agrees that he is a genius, but he died poor and suffering, no money, because he was gay. He was gay, and he was involved with a young man, and the young man's father went to court and sued him. As a result, he was put into jail for hard labor for 2 years. And that's how he lost all his fame and fortune. There was a time, every night he would go to a party, and he would be the center of the soul of the party every night. But after he came out of the jail, nobody wanted to associate with him, and he still has this huge spending habit. So he's very poor, and practically died on the street. Maybe someday we'll talk about Oscar Wilde, but his plays are repeatedly being adapted every few decades, there's a new adaptation of his one play or another. Things like Lady Windermere's Fan, 我们翻译成少奶奶的扇子, or The Ideal Husband, 理想丈夫, and The Importance of Being Earnest. All these are supremely popular plays in his time. Well, let's talk about this movie. There's a cast of 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of them, and of them, 2 of them are the leading actors, and several are important supporting actors. If you have seen My Fair Lady, you know that the person playing Eliza's father and the person playing Higgins' mother and the person playing Colonel Pickering and the person playing the housekeeper, Mrs. Pierce, and even this last one who plays a suitor of Eliza. These are all distinctly very well characterized people in this play. So even though it's a short play, it's got so many outstanding actors in it. And when I saw My Fair Lady for the first time, I was impressed by all these supporting actors. And now I watch the original, I know that all these are just as good as the next one. So they were just equally matching one for one. Now I'm halfway into it. I'd like to ask anybody to say something because I just did not give you any opportunity to say something you think, what do you think about this movie? Because I really liked it when I watched it. I didn't expect it to be this good. And I could even say that it was better than the musical because I already like the musical very much. And I found that everything I like about the musical was already in this original movie. Did you like it?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if I didn't mention, you probably would not have found this movie. And it's really worth your while to watch, don't you think?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think Leslie Howard plays much better than Rick Harrison.
Yes, that's what I think. For one thing, I think he looked much younger. Rex Harrison is kind of too
old.
Role.
And
yes.
also Rick Harrison is a little brash. It's not
yes, yeah, that's right. Yes. They are both supremely confident, but
Leslie Howard is honest, higher class.
That's right, exactly. I agree with you. Yeah, but Rex Harrison was a good actor and he did a very good job, but I think he is not as good as Leslie Howard. And I looked and I think Rex Harrison was like 55 or 56 when he played that role. And this guy died at age 50. So that was like 5 years before he died. So he was 45, probably 45. So he was younger and his manners are more elegant, I think so.
Right.
Yeah. So he's an English actor, director, producer, and also writer. He regularly have his stories published in New York Times, New Yorker, and the Vanity Fair. These are all very respected publications. He was one of the biggest box office draws and movie idols of the 1930s. And did you recall seeing him anywhere else?
Oh, yeah. Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Scarlet Pimpernel.
Yes.
Gone with the Wind.
Yes, yes. He played Ashley.
Ashley.
Yeah. And he really played that role very well too. You can see how he was depressed, not being able to carry on as the head of the household and being pursued by this very rash, beautiful woman. And that was the year after this movie, Pygmalion. And he died a few years later. And does anyone know how he died?
Yeah, it was supposed to be mysteriously. The plane was shut down. Some said could be German because of what he did during the war. He was involved with some kind of a anti-German propaganda.
Yes, yes.
Things.
He's probably definitely involved in the war propaganda. Many of the movie industry people were naturally involved in propaganda with the government to promote their cause. But he, more than anyone else, seems to be involved in the intelligence. So that's why they think his plane was shut down. But it's a shame because he was so young.
Yeah. And he's the professor, the role that he played, Professor Higgins, is so much stronger and dominating compared to some of his other roles, like actually in Gone with the Wind, even the
that's right. That's
the Petrified Forest or something. He always seems to be kind of weak and wimpy.
That's right. Exactly.
I didn't know why he was such a box office idol. But this movie, he's quite different. I see the character there.
He shines. Yes.
Yeah, he's kind of shine through. Yeah, I was impressed with that.
Yeah.
Quite
Have
different.
you seen Petrified Forest?
Yes. Yeah, that's also another wimpy thing.
Yes, it's a wimpy thing, especially when you compare him to Betty Davis and Humphrey Bogart.
Yes.
Those are two very dominating people.
I know, right? So,
and I also saw Berkeley Square, in which he's neither. He's not wimpy and he's not dominating. He's just a straight guy. But he could play all kinds of roles, I think.
Yeah.
He certainly did Ashley Wilkes very well.
Yes, yeah. Non-committal, wishy-washy. Yes.
I think he, being a perfect English gentleman, when he gets to Hollywood, they would naturally give him the more subtle and sophisticated roles.
Soft-spoken, right.
But this is when he was still in London.
Yes.
Okay.
No, he's excellent here. Really good.
Yeah, I really like his play. Here are some of the movies you just mentioned. The Gone with the Wind, that he was playing Ashley Wilkes, and some of the other movies. He's called a quintessential Englishman. Quintessential is a very good word. It means somebody who is uniquely elegant and representative of this high class thing. So you call him a quintessential Englishman. And he was nominated for an Oscar in Berkeley Square because of this Pygmalion, this movie. I looked into something and I watched the Berkeley Square on YouTube. If you want, you can. And I did not really like it too much because it is more or less a Back to the Future kind of movie. He was a current day person going back into an old house of his ancestor, and as he enters, the time just returned to the day that he was his grandfather when he was young. So when we have seen so many time travel movies, that one is not really interesting in that respect. But he was nominated for an Oscar for that role. And I've seen quite a lot of these, but not Petrified Forest. That's why this morning I ordered it from the library and I'm going to see it. It sounds like an interesting thing about the hostage taking scenario. But Of Human Bondage was adapted from a famous Somerset Maugham novel, 叫做人性枷锁, and he was playing a limping doctor, which is a weak character compared with a lower class English woman played by Betty Davis. So he was again the weaker person in the story. But in Scarlet Pimpernel, it's more like in the role he played in Pygmalion, because he is a supremely, it's a regular, rich and aristocratic person, but secretly he is engaged in the rescuing all the royalties from France during the French Revolution. In our language, we translated this movie or this play or this novel, 红色鹅肠花 or 红鸡肠草花. It is, let me show you this picture. This is a kind of wild flower, which is called the Scarlet Pimpernel. So this is written by a woman, a story, imaginary story about a rich and the ordinary person who secretly engaged in rescuing royalties, because during the French Revolution, all the people who used to be high class were arrested and executed. So these people across the channel in London, they look at this terrible place France has become, the age of terror. So they started to do some heavy work trying to rescue. Oh boy, that's so much. Okay, I'm showing all these things I'm going to show you. Oh, okay. I still need to go back. Okay. I'm only halfway here. We have this Gone with the Wind. In this one, I was talking about Gone with the Wind and Berkeley Square and Of Human Bondage and the Scarlet Pimpernel. That was a very popular movie, so they made a sequel out of it. And it's called The Pimpernel Smith. So it's more of the similar story. And The Petrified Forest had the Betty Davis and Humphrey Bogart and Pygmalion and Intermezzo. The very first movie I saw of Leslie Howard was Intermezzo. And it was about a violinist who does concert circle. He goes to places playing a concert with him as a violinist. And he hired this piano teacher of his daughter, who was played by Ingrid Bergman. And that's an elegant pair. You could not blame for falling in love with each other, but it was an affair out of wedlock. So that was a sad story. And it was originally a Swedish movie. And Ingrid Bergman was a Swedish actress. And she played the same role in the same movie in the Swedish version. Of course, they speak the Swedish language in that movie, but it's the same story. And the Hollywood producer saw that movie and went and insisted on having her come to Hollywood to make the same movie with Leslie Howard. And I was a little kid when I saw that. It was a very moving story. However, no matter how they look like a perfect pair, the man was married and he had a good wife and children. And eventually he had to give up this affair and go back to the family. Yeah, it's all very low key. I would say most of his movies, he was acting as a quintessential Englishman. He was nominated for an Oscar twice, the first time in Berkeley Square and the second time in Pygmalion, and he did not get one. And this is what Uchi just told us about. He was involved in war propaganda, supporting the Allies. The Allies is the side with America and UK and France and so on. And later on, we joined them on the Allied side, even though our war started much earlier than their war. World War II started in Germany when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. I think it was like August 31st or something like that. Anyway, so, but way before that, 27, it was 30, 26. When was our war? Our Second World War lasted 8 hours. I'm sorry, 8 years, while theirs lasted 5 years. So we started the war 3 years before the West, and there was no Allied when we started our war against the Japanese. I mean, the Sino-Japanese War. The second Sino-Japanese War is the war we call the 八年抗战, which eventually evolved into Second World War. And the first Sino-Japanese War was the 甲午战争 in 1894 to 1895. He was active in anti-German propaganda, and he was probably involved in the intelligence gathering or something. And in the 2 years after his death, there was a book that mentioned his work during the war as one of the most valuable facets of British propaganda. So he was really heavily involved in British propaganda, and he was rumored to have been involved in Allied intelligence, and that's why people say his airplane was shot down by the Luftwaffe, that is the Air Force. German Air Force is called the Luftwaffe. Shut down the flight over the Atlantic. So he was flying between United States and England as a passenger when he died. And this movie, I bet every single person of you has seen this, if not more, at least once. This is a novel by Margaret Mitchell that was probably an all-time bestseller novel. It was really well written. However, in hindsight, like half a century, more than half a century, almost 1 century later, when we look at it, we find that a lot of things, especially about how the Black people were depicted in the story, it's really quite racist. Actually, you can say that those people in the South during the Civil War, they are racist. They started the war because they wanted to keep on having Black slaves. So it's no big deal calling them racist, but nowadays, lots of the words used in those stories we cannot use anymore, such as niggers. So we have this novelist and the producer, David O. Selznick, and Victor Fleming is the director. Rhett Butler was played by Clark Gable, and the Scarlett O'Hara, Vivian Lee. And they auditioned hundreds of thousands of actors for the role of Scarlett O'Hara. And accidentally, Vivian Lee came to visit United States because she was having an affair as a mistress of Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier came to United States to play in the movie Wuthering Heights, 咆哮山庄. And Vivian Lee was just tagging along, and she went to an audition, and they chose her to play Scarlett O'Hara, and she did an excellent job. And we have Leslie Howard, and Melanie Hamilton was played by Olivia de Havilland. She was the very last person to die after she turned over 100 years old. And when she died, everyone in that movie already died. Almost everyone. So this is a story about Scarlet Pimpernel. Yeah, I've read some of those novels. And this is the movie that Uchi already saw. It's called The Petrified Forest. It's named after a national park, either in Wyoming or in Utah, somewhere there, yeah. Petrified forest means that the kind of fossil that came about by having lime water seeping through dead trees and going into the cells of each of that tree. And as a result, that section of the log becomes fossil, 化石, 化石森林, okay. And you see that at that time, I was very interested when I read about this morning. It's about Leslie Howard being on top of the list, the hierarchy. He was the most famous star that was hired to play in this movie in the same role that he just played on Broadway. And he had the control of whether they could hire this or that person because of his high status. And the movie company wanted to hire Edward G. Robinson to play the bad guy. The bad guy is modeled after John Dillinger, who was the public enemy #1, named by J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director. And the movie, the bosses, they wanted to hire Edward G. Robinson, who was in many of the gangster movies. But Leslie Howard says, if you don't hire Humphrey Bogart to play my opposite, I will not be in this movie. So he's a big star, and they had to agree with him because the contract says he has the final say on who we hire to play certain roles. So Humphrey Bogart got his first break. He was a nobody before that, but he met Leslie Howard, who liked him and wanted him to play this important role. And as a result, Humphrey Bogart became a very, very famous movie actor. If you ask any American people who like American movies, not necessarily American, if you ask anyone who's not outside this country, they would more likely tell you that the best actor they love is Humphrey Bogart. He was in, of course, in Casablanca. And he was not handsome. He just had that very American style that hit the American people very much. People just like him. When I came to this country, in my country that I came from, which was Taiwan, we all loved people such as Robert Taylor, but an American gentleman, but people in America, they don't like him at all. Most people don't know him. Okay, I will welcome anybody to cut in because I start to cough now. Somebody's coughing too. So I'm going to watch this movie in a few weeks when the library, the movie I put on hold comes to me. And I will be able to tell you more about this story. And here is about Leslie Howard, how he gave Humphrey Bogart a break so that he became an all-time favorite of American actors. And he was forever grateful that Leslie Howard insisted on hiring him for this role. So Humphrey Bogart, whose second wife is Lauren Bacall, they had a daughter named Leslie Howard Bogart in honor of Howard. That was 2 years after Leslie Howard died. And of course, Lauren Bacall's marriage to Humphrey Bogart was a Hollywood scandal because Humphrey Bogart was married when he met and fell in love with Lauren Bacall. And they were considered a perfect pair at that time. But of course, Humphrey Bogart died very early in his life and was probably 44 years old, died of smoke-related cancer. And this is intermezzo in which you see Ingrid Bergman in her very first Hollywood role. And she had a very illustrious career in Hollywood, also filled with scandals. Lots of people are, because at that time, people's morals or standards are so high, any extramarital affairs was considered extremely immoral. And I'm talking about her affair with Roberto Samsorini. I forgot the first two letters of her husband's name. Italian director fell in love with her while she was still married to the doctor, the Swedish doctor. When she was an actress.
Melanie.
Pardon me? Would you say that again? Bertil, read, I don't know. Anyway, so she was a traditional housewife, but she became an actress. But in her household, her husband, the doctor, rules supreme. He is in charge of everything, and the wife must listen to him and do everything the husband says. But then she became a big movie star and went to America. The marriage just fell apart, but they were not divorced when she fell in love with the Italian directors. So it became all very, very scandalous because she had a baby before she divorced her first husband. And because of that, nobody would hire her anymore. So she went to Europe and made a couple Italian movies and the English movies and so on. And when people eventually forgave her and took her back. So you look at her career, she had a long stretch of time that she did not work for Hollywood at the peak of her career. But of course, she came back and made many, many good movies. And she looks so elegant and kind. It's amazing how people can bring about such supreme elegance to a role, to any role. Okay. So this was her very first American movie. And you probably have never heard of Wendy Hiller, unlike Leslie Howard. She's younger than Leslie Howard, of course, you can see in the movie. And she died like 50 years later. She had a much longer life. And I like her acting in this movie more than I like Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady, because she is more convincing as a flower girl. Audrey Hepburn is just too fantastically beautiful and elegant for her to be playing that dirty little flower girl. But Wendy Hiller is not so drop dead gorgeous. So it's more convincing for her. And she really acted very well playing this foul-mouthed flower girl, speaking very poor English. And she is more of a stage actress than a movie actress. So she was more often on the stage, usually in London, but sometimes elsewhere as well. But she had more time on the stage than in movie. So when we look at her list of movies, the list was much shorter than just about anyone we could see. So I have a short list. Well, she was in more movies than this, but this is a short list of all very excellent movies. She was in movies before Pygmalion, but I start the list with Pygmalion, Major Barbara. Major Barbara is a Bernard Shaw play on stage, later became a movie. And she was in Major Barbara as Major Barbara with Rex Harrison. So they're about the same age. And the Major Barbara is, you would think, how could a woman be a major? That's because she's not in the army. She is in Salvation Army, which is like a branch of a church. It's a Protestant church doing social work. So she is a major in Salvation Army. And in this movie, 1941, Wendy Hiller played Major Barbara. But this play was also made into other future movies. And she won an Oscar for being in Separate Tables. And Separate Tables and Gigi were in the same year competing for Oscar. And that was the year 1958 when I was first aware of Oscar. Before that year, I had no idea what Oscar was about. And that year, when I read the newspaper, it was splashed with all these things about Oscar. They were talking about Gigi, called the 金粉世界, or Separate Tables, called in Chinese 鸳鸯谱. 鸳鸯谱 was not a very famous movie, but that year it has a sterling cast of excellent actors and actresses, and she won a supporting Oscar. At that time, I had no idea who she was. I did not know Wendy Hiller until I watched A Man for All Seasons. She played the wife of Thomas More. And she was a boarding house keeper in the movie called The Separate Tables. And it's got lots of people like Burt Lancaster, David Niven, Deborah Carr. They were all top-notch actors, but she, I think, and David Niven won Oscar for that that year. However, Best Picture that year went to Gigi, which is a musical also by Lerner and Lowe. Lerner and Lowe also wrote My Fair Lady. So I was talking about Gigi. Gigi was a movie that won Best Picture in 1958. And Wendy Hiller was playing the mother in Sons and Lovers. Sons and Lovers was an adaptation of a novel by D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence was most famous for writing Lady Chatterley's Lover, 查泰莱夫人的情人. At that time, it was scandalous for people to write about extramarital affairs as the good guys. The Lady Chatterley was a beautiful young woman married to an older man who was crippled later, probably after they got married. So she was a depressed or oppressed wife, and she fell in love with the gardener. And the story of Sons and Lovers was also written by D.H. Lawrence. He was an excellent novelist. He was probably gay as well. And the next movie was 1966. I mentioned before that this is the #1 movie I love. I love this movie very much. As a result, I would know a little more about this movie than I know about others. And she was in an all-cast movie, in the movie called The Murder on the Orient Express. And you probably know Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is a suspense or murder novel writer. She wrote numerous dozens of murder mystery stories, which were later made into movies. They were novels made into movies, and usually there will be a room full or a boat full of famous people who has a reason to kill this person who eventually died in this house or on this boat or whatever. So it's always a murder case with many suspects, and you would have many, for example, 10 suspects. They were all played by an excellent actor or actress. So, and Agatha Christie story made into a movie is always a showcase of famous actors and actresses. Recently, we had one murder on the River Nile, 尼罗河谋杀. And we had Gail Gadot as a beautiful woman, but there usually are a lot of other people like this current new movie, Agatha Christie movie, was made by Kenneth Branagh, and he also made a few years ago Murder on the Orient Express. He is famous, so lots of people invest, and his movie looks gorgeous. Spent millions of dollars to make a movie which doesn't bring much freshness to the story because it's always that old story. But Murder on the Orient Express had Wendy Hiller in it, in which Ingrid Bergman also received an Oscar for supporting actress, because that movie, as I mentioned, also had a sterling cast of excellent actors. And there's the Elephant Man, about this deformed person who has warts all over his body, and it's called An Elephant Man. The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn and the Countess Alice. These are all when Wendy Hiller was much older, and she died when she was like 80, close to 90 actually. She died 90. Yeah, I think she died at age 90. That's right. And she worked as late as 1992, all in supporting roles. So a long time ago, she stopped being the leading lady. But when we saw her in this movie, we just saw Pygmalion, she really did very well in it. She was nominated for an Oscar. Yeah, she won an Oscar for being in the Separate Tables. So that was also a cast of many famous actors, and she was the innkeeper, or the lady who owns the boarding house. So you would have different people living there. Each person has a background story. Yeah, this is a type of story that has many people assembled into a bigger story. So this is a story made from two short plays by Terence Ratigan. We just mentioned Terence Ratigan, who wrote a lot of very respected stage plays, whether long or short. And this is a combined the two short plays. And of course, there's The Man for All Seasons, which is about a famous writer whose name is Thomas More. He was executed by having his head chopped off on the order of the king, because the king wanted, Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, in order to marry his second wife, Anne Boleyn. And after a while, of course, history tells you that Anne Boleyn died because the king wanted a new wife, who was Anne Boleyn's maid. And the king accused Anne Boleyn for having extramarital affairs, which was wrong. I mean, it didn't happen. The king wanted to kill her, so he had her killed for having an affair, which was not existent. And of course, we know that the king went on to marry the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth wife, but he died before the sixth wife was killed. That is a long story. Lots of movies were about Henry and the six wives, or Anne of 1,000 Days. That's because Anne Boleyn was a queen for 1,000 days. That means 3 years. Okay, this is a very interesting story. The play was written by an English teacher. He was a teacher in the high school, and the school wanted to put on a play, and he did not find any play that's suitable. So he wrote this play, and later on, it became a runaway hit on Broadway and other places, and was turned into a movie. And Paul Scofield, who played Thomas More, was in this play. He won a Tony for being in that play on stage, and then he won an Oscar for the same role, which is rare for a person to win both a Tony and an Oscar for playing the same person. Okay. So Thomas More was struggling with this king who wanted to divorce his wife, and the Pope would not let him do that. So he took his church away from the Catholic Church. So he became the leader, or the religious head of the Church of England, Anglican Church. So in this movie, we have Thomas More was played by Paul Scofield. And in the beginning, it was on stage in London on the West End stage. So when you talk about the world of plays, stage plays in the world, you have to talk about Broadway in New York and the West End in London. These are the two most biggest, most respected, and some of the best plays were staged in Broadway in New York and the West End in London. And what's the difference? They often have the same thing playing from here to there or from there to here, but the price is much lower in London than in New York. That's as far as I could tell. And you can save a lot of money by buying an airplane ticket and go to London to watch many movies, which I did twice. Each time I watched like 10 plays. It's really worth the airline ticket. So we have supporting actors and actresses. Wendy Hiller was Thomas More's wife, and Robert Shaw was King Henry VIII. Susanna York is the daughter of Thomas More, because the daughter understands her father much more and supported the father, while the wife is just angry that the husband would rather die than to sign some paper. And here we have Orson Welles, who plays the cardinal in this movie. When it opens up, it was Orson Welles playing the cardinal who was dying and lying there. So it was a small role, but he has a commanding presence. So this movie is again a critical and a box office success, and it won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Fred Zinnemann, and the Best Actor for Schofield. It also won many other awards, needless to say. It was a really great movie. And this is, of course, even a bigger financial success than A Man for All Seasons. This is My Fair Lady. I think probably every one of you have seen it. In my opinion, a very good way, very entertaining way to learn English is to watch movies in addition to watching news. But news is not so entertaining. While movie, you have the liberty to watch and follow the story, be entertained, and even guess what's going to happen next. So that's a fun part about watching movies. And that's an imaginary world that you can go to all the time very easily nowadays. And this is Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews. By comparison, this is the stage play. Julie Andrews is much better in this role than Audrey Hepburn. So when they want to make into a movie, so many people wanted Julie Andrews to be in the movie, but the production team eventually went with Audrey Hepburn because they're investing so much money on this project that they did not want to bank on an unknown actress called Julie Andrews. But she became quite famous when she was on stage playing Eliza Doolittle. Later, she played Guinevere in Camelot on stage as well with Richard Burton. And that movie role went to Vanessa Redgrave. So she got many, many great breaks, but again and again, she was abandoned by the movie makers because she was not a famous name. However, later on, of course, she became very famous when she played Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. Yeah, The Sound of Music is probably biggest hit among all these movies I mentioned. That's how Julie Andrews became famous. So we have these two posters side by side. And on the left-hand side, you can see George Bernard Shaw was an angel on top of the cloud, handling, he was manipulating Henry Higgins. Well, Henry Higgins was manipulating Eliza Doolittle. So these are like marionettes, puppet shows. You have your fingers on strings, controlling another person's movement. That's called a marionette, marionette, I suppose. So when they made the musical on stage, they put the playwright on top of this poster. While when they made the movie, they had Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison. Both of them were too old for these roles. Yeah, that's something they could not change. Yeah, the age was against them. American musical drama adapted from the stage play, the musical on stage in 1956. Written by Lerner and Lowe. Lerner means Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe. They were a pair that together they wrote many successful musicals, such as Gigi we just mentioned. And the first one was probably Brigadoon. And they also made Camelot. And later on the Clear Day, You Can See Forever, which had Barbara Streisand and Yves Montand, who is a French actor. And when I read a memoir by Alan J. Lerner, he mentioned that when they were rehearsing for My Fair Lady, Rex Harrison was very, very unhappy. Every day he would say, show me this line in Shaw's play. If it's not in Shaw's play, I will not sing it. So he would say, bring me the Penguin, which means the book, the popular edition of Shaw's play, published by Penguin Books. So every day he would say, show me the penguin. So one day they made a joke on him. They brought in a stuffed penguin. And when he said, show me the penguin, they would push the penguin onto the stage for a laugh. So he thought he was privileged to be in a play that was originally written by Shaw. So he wanted to know that every line in this musical actually came from that book, that play. So he is always playing the dominant role, and like Leslie Howard, who used to play the weaker one. With a screenplay by Alan J. Lerner and the direct by George Cukor. That's also a very famous director, George Cukor. And he was an old hand. He directed many of Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy's movies. Well, we already know the story about Eliza Doolittle, played by Audrey Hepburn. And they won 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor, and the Best Director. But of course, the Best Actress was not won by this movie. In the same year for Oscar, the Best Actress went to Mary Poppins for Julie Andrews. So all the Julie Andrews fans got their revenge when she beats Audrey Hepburn in this Oscar competition. But of course, Audrey Hepburn was much older. And she also died not very old, like 60 something, of cancer. And she had a string of huge successes because you can bet that as long as she was in the movie, that movie will sell very, very well. She had more fans than anyone else you can imagine because she is so lovely. So she was in Roman Holiday. That was her first movie. And then there was Sabrina with Humphrey Bogart and William Holden, War and Peace. And each one of them is a big hit. War and Peace is even a very, very big hit because it's a long movie made from Tolstoy story. Huh? And it has Henry Fonda. And, you know, her husband was Mel Ferrell, whom they met there in this movie. Well, they actually met on stage when they were playing on Dean, but after War and Peace, they got married. I have a picture of that. Yeah, Mel Ferrell and Audrey Hepburn on the set of War and Peace before they were married, I think. Funny Face with Fred Astaire, Love in the Afternoon with Gary Cooper, Green Mansion with Anthony Perkins, The Nun Story with Peter Finch, The Unforgiven with Burt Lancaster, Breakfast at Tiffany's with George Papard, Charade with Cary Grant, My Fair Lady, Two for the Road with Albert Finney, Wait Until Dark. She was the supreme main character in Wait Until Dark. So other people are all in supporting roles, including the person who played her husband, who is Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who was famous for TV series FBI. And the villain in Wait Until Dark was Alan Arkin, who was an excellent actor, but always playing a supporting role. And later on, after she was married and divorced, she no longer, she retired early on, actually. She had 2 unhappy marriages, but then she came back and made Robin and Marian and the Bloodline, and Always. The last movie she made was Always, with Richard Dreyfuss and Holly Hunter. And she played an angel, very fittingly. And Rex Harrison is lesser known in America because he was based in London. And as I just mentioned, he was in the movie Major Barbara, playing opposite to Wendy Hiller. But Wendy Hiller is a bigger star in that movie because Rex Harrison playing her suitor or fiance is a minor role because Major Barbara's father had the commanding place in that story. However, the first movie I saw of Rex Harrison, other than My Fair Lady and Cleopatra, was Blithe Spirit. I was really moved by his acting. He's so witty. It's a comedy about ghosts. Very, very funny. If you could find that, that is the movie I would recommend, Blithe Spirit. And in that movie, there was a song called the Always. I think it's a Cole Porter song. That played an important role in that movie. In that, it was a Noah Coward script originally for a stage play. Anna and the King of Siam, that is, about the king and I. Anna is a school teacher hired by King of Siam, 泰国的暹罗国王, to teach his many, many children. He's a king with many concubines and wives, and he has an army of children. And he thinks that Thailand needs to westernized. So he hired Anna, who was a widow in England, to come to Thailand to teach the kids. And this is a movie, not a musical, Anna and the King of Siam, which was later made into a Rodgers and Hammerstein movie that has Deborah Kerr in it. The ghost and Yul Brynner, he half of Yul Brynner's life he was playing the King of Siam, either in movie or in numerous stage plays, either in the play or more likely in the musical. The Ghost and Mrs. Muir is a light comedy, also about a ghost. And I've seen that one, but I don't have to recommend it. Or Midnight Lace, that was not a fantastic movie. But Rex Harrison won 2 Oscars back-to-back for Cleopatra and My Fair Lady in 1963 and 1964. So that proves that he was the reigning actor. When he was pretty late, actually, he was almost 60 years old, more than 55, yeah. So he really bloomed later in life. And he was in The Agony and the Ecstasy, which is the biography of Michelangelo, the artist who designed St. Peter's Cathedral and sculpted King David and Moses and many other sculptures, and painted the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel. That's Michelangelo. But I do not recommend Dr. Dolittle. It's just too silly for me. It's a musical too. But this is almost an identical picture for the scene with Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews. And I bet you can find a similar shot of Audrey Hepburn in the same scene. And we come to the last to talk about George Bernard Shaw. In Chinese, we call him Xiao Bona. This is because even though his first name is George, he insisted that everyone calls him Bernard Shaw or Bernard Shaw. The accent can be in the beginning or in the second one. So that's how Chinese translated his name into Xiao Bona. And the last name just happened to be the same as the Chinese last name. So I know people who had the same Chinese last name when they came to the United States. One of my high school classmates, she had her name Shaw, S-H-A-W. So Bernard Shaw, he was in China. He visited China in his old age because he lived to 94. So it could be a couple of decades before he died. He really died old, and very befittingly, he died after he climbed up a tree and fell. So every time I climb up a tree, I said, oh, let me not be another Bernard Shaw. Of course, I'm not nearly as famous as he is, but it would be embarrassing for me to fall out of a tree and die. People would say, you deserve it. That's what people said to him when he died, because he was too naughty. He would not recognize that he is no longer the sprite young man he used to be. And if you read any of his plays, you will find that spirit everywhere in his plays. He is always fighting some authority or common knowledge or recognized value. He wants to be different from anyone else. That's why, even though he's a big follower of Ibsen, Henrik Ibsen in Norway, and the Norwegian playwright, Shaw was a big fan of his, but they are very, very different because Ibsen is a serious person. He's always trying to change the world and pointing out this wrong and that wrong in a very serious manner. However, Shaw is doing all these things sarcastically. He's always making fun of people who are stubborn or who hold on to old ideas and such things. So his plays are much more entertaining, even though his causes are not really so always good. For example, he likes Stalin and Mussolini, whom we all learn to hate, but he loves them. So when he writes a play trying to convince people to change their mind, he may not be successful. And those ideas may not be good ideas, but it's always entertaining. That's how he has such a huge following, because his plays are so entertaining. So he's a playwright. Well, first, he's an Irish. If you know what that word means, he is one kind of Irish person who went to England and became famous and became an English writer. And the people forget that he was Irish. But there are other Irish playwrights. They stick to their own homeland, and they were hostile against the English because the English treated them like they treated, say, Black people in America. English people really put down the Irish people, looked down upon them, and persecuted them for being Irish, and they suffered a great deal. Millions of Irish people died because of policies during Queen Victoria's time. So Bernard Shaw was one that came away from Ireland and became a famous person. People no longer consider him as Irish. However, there were lots of playwrights who stayed in Ireland telling you a story about how the British people persecuted them and fought them and so on, how they suffer and so on. So there are many of those Irish playwrights, but you wouldn't consider Bernard Shaw as one of those Irish playwrights. Those you can think of Sean O'Casey. Well, we were just talking about Oscar Wilde. He was one of those Irish people who eventually shined in shone, you could say shone, in London, in London society, but he came from Ireland. However, Sean O'Casey and those people like, I think O'Casey wrote Juno and the Peacock. He used his accent, Irish accent, to pronounce peacock as peacock. So in the title, it's called the Juno and the Peacock. And there are others. It's not Salinger. John D. I forgot the name. A name that's similar to Salinger, but is not Salinger. And he wrote Riders to the Sea and some others. They write about the Eastern Uprising, which is their revolution against the British people in 1916. And eventually the British government gave up on them and let them declare independence in 1922. That's a story that you could read about and try to understand more, because we when we grow up, we just know that there's England, Scotland, Ireland, and we thought they were just one of several parts that becomes the great British Empire or UK, United Kingdom. But Ireland is really a separate part from the so-called British Isles. What am I talking about? His influence on Western theater, culture, and the politics extended from the 1880s to his death and beyond, with a range incorporating both contemporary satire and historical allegory. Shaw became the leading dramatist of his generation. Yeah, for example, Terence Ratigan, he writes about a handful of people, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 people in the room, in the living room or something. But George Bernard Shaw is never limited to one place. He could write about Caesar and Cleopatra. He could write about Don Juan in Spain, and he could write about Joan of Arc in France. On the other hand, he would also talk about people like Pygmalion, really citizens of London. So he has a huge range, and he writes about all kinds of things and the people. So that's why he is a much greater playwright. And he started to write plays when he was a critic. He was newspaper critic for plays and books and shows and things like that. He was a very respected critic in the public industry, but he started to write plays himself on his own. And he wrote quite a lot when he was young, but not until Arms and the Man. Arms and the Man made him very famous. And from then on, just about every play he wrote was a hit. He was influenced by Henrik Ibsen, and he was trying to bring Ibsen's kind of story to stage in London. So he wants to write realistic stories, people really living now in the neighborhood. As I mentioned, he is much more entertaining, while Ibsen is dead serious about everything he writes. And he has all kinds of ideas he wants to put into his plays. So in his play, you see all kinds of things that he promotes, his political ideas, social and religious ideas. For example, he's against the Catholic Church or British Anglican Church, but at the same time, he could be religious, but he is against those commercial religions. And he is he's a big a member of Fabian Society, which is a socialist party, I think. However, well, in the beginning, he writes all their propaganda. However, later he turned away from them. So things that he used to believe in, he maybe no longer believes in. So if you are someone reading the play, you better be careful not to be influenced by him while you were being entertained. He wrote 60 plays, which is an amazing number of plays. Writing plays are different from writing novels. Not only do you have to write a story, create a situation with different people reacting to different people. In a play, you have to immediately let the audience know who is who's talking, and what's the relationship with someone else. In a novel, you can spin the yarn slowly and just take your time. But in a play, you have to say, for example, this person comes on stage and he would say mother or something. Immediately, you know that person is the mother. If you don't bring out this relationship early on, the people will be so confused. So it's difficult to write a play, and it's difficult to read a play. At a time, I read 24 of Liang Shiqiu's translation of Shakespeare's plays. I find it extremely difficult to know who is who and what's the relationship and where the storyline is going. That was really a training for me to read the plays. I still think novels are so much easier to read. Now, people rated him as the dramatist second only to Shakespeare. That's a high bar. Shakespeare is the most famous playwright in the world. And people created a word called the Shavian to mean Bernard Shaw's adjective to represent his play, his idea, his skills, and so on. We use the word Shavian, which means Shaw's. And he was awarded Nobel Prize in Literature in 1925. And here we have a bust. A bust is a statue of a person above the chest. Here's a bust of Shaw, sculpted by Auguste Rodin. Rodin is the most famous French sculptor in the world. And he himself had a huge, big museum with only his pieces in there. And I read somewhere that George Bernard Shaw says, I am so rich and famous in the world, but I do need to have a bust made by Auguste Rodin, because one day nobody wants to read my play or see my movies made of my plays, and nobody will know me. But if Rodin made a sculpture of me, I will live on forever because his works are eternal. That's how he insists on Rodin to make a bust of himself. That's a smart move. And he's always arguing. So his plays, when he expresses views, it's very contentious, which means confrontational. Always people butting their heads about things. There's no quiet people in his play, I suppose. And he courted unpopularity. He wants to, well, as my father would say, 任何理由的反对者. No matter what you say, he's always against it, because that's how he draws your attention. That's how he makes people notice him. And that's how he becomes entertaining, because he courted unpopularity. So during the First World War, when people were arguing whether you're for German side or for the British side, he blames both sides for starting the war. That's why he would, in the unique place where nobody is standing with him, he is different from everybody. And on the matters regarding Ireland, though he's not a Republican, he's criticizing British policy on Ireland. And his stances, which means his position in matters, do not affect the popularity of his play. He could be writing about something that is for a certain idea. Even people don't like that idea, people still like his plays. That's how popular he is. I have found pictures of him visiting China with some famous Chinese people in my class. I showed them before, but I forgot. Anyway, His appetite for politics and the controversy remained undiminished. He lived a very long time, but as he gets older, he's still a very rebellious person. Yeah, I talked about his admiration for both Mussolini and Stalin. And okay, he wrote many plays even after he was very old, and these are very few of his plays. He wrote 60 plays. One thing I can say is that even though he was before my time, and I do get to watch some of his plays in movies again and again, but I also had the opportunity to watch his real plays on stage in Seattle. I've seen Candida in Greenwood, a little theater in Greenwood, probably called the Taproot Theater. And I also saw this Misalliance, which is the last one here, in Seattle Center. So even though he's dead for a long time, for 70 years, his plays still got to be revived on stage from time to time. I was amazed when I saw Misalliance in Seattle Center. I think it's in Bagley Theater. And we all sat there and went through Act 1, and the curtain closed. And when it opens up, the same house that the people were acting around the house now has an airplane stuck on top of the roof. That was an amazing feat for a small theater in Seattle. Nonetheless, they managed to put a small airplane stuck onto the roof of the theater. That was amazing to me. Yeah, I also saw Caesar and Cleopatra in the movie, an old one with Claudette Colbert. So that was not a new one, but some are really new. And here's the one called The Arms and Men. It's about a soldier during the war between Bulgaria and Serbia. There's a rich family in Bulgaria, and they were dealing with the daily life and so on and so forth. And a soldier escaped, the enemy soldier escaped and hid in the young girl's bedroom. And in this play, Shaw decided to call this escaped soldier chocolate cream soldier. He is taking a very frivolous stand on the matter of war and peace. He thinks that people should not be raging wars against each other. So he would call this soldier a chocolate cream soldier because he escaped hid in this girl's bedroom, and he was starving, and the girl found him and gave him some chocolate cream to eat. So throughout the story, he was called the chocolate cream soldier. So I found that a person called George Orwell, who famously wrote 1984 and The Animal Farms. They were very, very outstanding and well-read in high schools. Just about everyone in high school, in this school, has read one or both of his stories. He made a comment 50 years later, after The Arms and the Men was put on stage. He thinks that it is probably the wittiest play he ever wrote, the most flawless technically, and in spite of being a very light comedy, the most telling. He thinks that Shaw wrote about his many different ideas, which no longer are issues. For example, in Mrs. Warren's Profession, he was saying that women became prostitutes because they need to make a living. They could not find a job, not because they were sexually promiscuous or they are morally decrepit. it's an economic issue. And now this thing is recognized as generally true. And his play no longer has this very pointed opinion anymore. However, Arms and Men to George Orwell is a good play, not only because it's good in other ways, but because this issue wears very well, because even now we still are in a situation where we think men should not be engaged in wars. To have wars is just a silly thing for men to do. Yeah, okay. His other play, yeah, these are what George Orwell said. And I should wrap it up. I mentioned today that I've been to London twice. Each time I saw about 10 plays there, because they if you don't know, the British citizens must pay a TV tax, because everyone must pay a TV tax to support their public TV. Unlike in this country, when you have public TV, public broadcasting, public radio, and so on, they have to beg for money day after day from the audience, because they do not have government support, or maybe the government support is too little. But in UK, you pay a TV tax to support your public TV, and you pay out of your taxes, you are paying to support National Theatre. If you go to the South Bank of London, River Thames, in London, there is a place called National Theatre, Royal National Theatre in London. It now has 4 theaters, and they are always putting on some experimental new plays or old plays. Of course, they put on lots of Shakespeare and so on, or Chekhov. I've seen quite a few Chekhov there, but they always play on very, very new, not commercially viable plays, because they were supported by the government. So you can pay very little. For example, the first year I was there, every ticket is 10 pounds in National Theatre. And the second year I was there, a ticket can be had for 17 pounds. And that, compared to what you would pay in Broadway, that's easily 100, 200, 300, 400. Sometimes you need to pay $2,000 for a ticket on Broadway. That's, well, it rarely happened before, but now it happens all the time. For example, Hamilton, they would have a lottery, and the people can buy those tickets for thousands of dollars on eBay. But if you go to London, a really average income, people with average income can afford to go to several plays in a week, I would say. And the city being so safe, you can usually go to a night show and come back at 11 or 12, and there's never any worry. And of course, there are matinee, which is plays in the afternoon. They are even cheaper. And you can see all kinds of plays in London. So make sure that when you go visiting London, you would have extra days, and you could buy tickets online before you go and arrange everything easily. Now, I have a map of London's West End, and I've been to many of these theaters. However, the National Theatre is across the river here, National Theatre. It's not part of the West End. The West End is this part. You can say it's the west part of the heart of London. You have Trafalgar Square here, church. Okay. I'm looking at St. Martin in the Fields right here. Okay, Trafalgar is here. Yeah, and this is National Art Museum and the Portrait Museum. And here is Leicester Square, and you can buy tickets for theater tickets right here on the same day at discount. And you can go to the theater and ask if there are any last minute tickets. I've bought a ticket for Jury Theater to see My Fair Lady right here on the day I was there. Yeah. I've also been to some other places, Her Magister Theater. And yeah, all these theaters I've been to. I also saw lots of Ibsens in London. You can hardly see any Ibsen plays in Seattle. Seattle is one of the cities in this country that has lots of theater going on, but I've never heard of an Ibsen play. But I've seen 3 Ibsen plays in London. Anyway, just a thought if you go to London, which I don't plan to do anytime soon. Any other comments?
Is it? Excuse me, but I get the feelings or impressions that especially in England, it seems that people hold higher respect for stage actor or actress, like a Shakespearean type of actor, actress like Laurence Olivier or even Richard Burton. Seems to have the classical trainings.
That's right.
Seems to be on another level compared to, say, the more popular entertaining media, the movie or TV, things like that.
Yeah, they are trained so well. They know how to project their voice far into the audience, and the regular American actor just could not do it. They could not memorize anything. I heard that Mary Tyler Moore was really shamed for not being able to remember her lines. But in the classically trained world, everyone could. For example, Ray Fine was in an Ibsen play I saw in London called The Brands. And for 3 hours straight, he was talking by himself. Very few other people said anything. He was talking, and everything was in rhyme. So it's a poem written by Ibsen that rhymes, and it talked on for 3 hours. It's just not something an American actor can do at all.
Yeah.
I also read Richard Burton's autobiography, or it was probably Winston Churchill's biography that including apart from Richard Burton. And he said that one day he was going to go on stage doing a Shakespearean play. And they were somehow, it's an emergency, they had to cut lots of places out of that play. So he was on stage, not doing the whole show, but he has to remember what was cut and what was not cut. However, Winston Churchill was down there in the audience. Every time he cuts a line, Winston Churchill would be there speaking the line that he missed. That's a story I really like because they are so good at their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the audience is at a level they appreciate.
That's right. Yeah. When I go to London to watch a Shakespearean movie show, I would just watch the audience and the people and this and that. But I could not understand, not even half, maybe 10% of the words I could not understand because of the old language and the accent.
Yeah. I saw 1984, I was in London and I was lucky enough to watch Rex Harrison and Claudette Colbert in a play called Aren't We All? And it was a short, I don't remember because it was so long ago, but was so, like you say, the small theater, but the sound, we were sitting in the back, and we just got the ticket last minute and got in. But it was really, really wonderful. People didn't treat him like he's such a superstar. He's just an actor on the stage, performer.
Exactly.
Very respectful, very, very impressive. Very nice.
That's right. It's a thrill to be remembered. I was in an Ibsen play with Patrick Stewart playing the leading role, the master builder. Yeah, that was an excellent play. And later on, I heard that he divorced his wife and married a girl who was in that play. And I saw Kenneth Branagh in National Theatre more than once. In this place like David Mamet's play, that is just not entertaining at all. Some of them really hard to like. Actually, he was playing somebody that was arrested by the police, and he was ranting and raving, and he took off his pants and the underwear. He was half naked on stage walking around. That was something to watch.
Hey, that's true to the art. Yeah.
But you only pay 10 sterling pound to see that.
Hey, that's the thing. Yeah,
that's a great deal.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost like an everyday thing that it's average people has the privilege to have the access to, instead of like here, it's like a once a year, once lifetime experience to buy the ticket, go to Broadway to see the show and have a dinner after. It's a different thing.
Yeah,
right?
definitely different. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I read some places says, I don't know how true, says Zhang Guorong, he picked up the name Leslie. It's the first name because his admiration for Leslie Howard.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it's true. I just thought that was interesting. I never heard of that. So.
Well, I kind of like this kind of format. It's easier for me to find a topic than to find the material. And we could talk about anything we want to, hopefully with more people speaking. Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry. Taking up most of the time. Sorry.
And we still keep our regular class format, and we would do the vocabulary and so on. Yeah, I like the alternating format. But again, I would emphasize for the third time today, make sure you pick some good movies to watch on YouTube. And there are so many, you're bound to be able to find a good one. And if you don't think you understand as much, you can turn on the caption. It will help you a little bit. And my next movie is Gandhi. Have you seen the movie Gandhi? It's not as popular as some of the other ones, but it is a big movie. It's very long, like 3 hours or more. And it won a lot of awards in its time, and it's a labor of love of Richard Attenborough. Richard Attenborough, I had a special liking because he went to Taiwan to film The Sand Pebbles. When I was in college, Steve McQueen and Candace Bergen went to Taipei to film The Sand Pebbles. And he played a supporting role, I mean, Richard Attenborough. And his brother is the famous David Attenborough, who made those nature movies. He was heavily supported by BBC. Great financial support for him to do all the things he loved to do, which is to film movies about wild animals. for a family, for a family to have two great movie makers. That was quite something. And making Gandhi is a guilt trip for any British citizens. If you watch John Oliver, who is a stand-up comedian, he has a show called Last Week Tonight or something. He is a British citizen, originally in Jon Stewart's the Daily News. Jon Stewart was all the rage for a number of years on Comedy Central for doing the fake news show to make fun of those people in the news. And several people in that show spin-off to have their own show. One is Stephen Colbert, and one is a movie actor, Stephen Carell, and one is John Oliver. And John Oliver, being a citizen from the British Empire, he is always saying, "We are sorry for what our country did to the world when we were the Great British Empire." He always say, he likes to say, when I go to any museum in the world, I have to hide my face, because this museum is going to tell how British Empire trashed their culture and the civilization and everything else. So making Gandhi was a guilt trip for Richard Attenborough. He's saying, what's that? Beatrice?
No.
No? Okay. Anyway, we're about to wrap up, but don't forget, I'm going to give you a link, or you can just go on YouTube and look for Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. I think it's Gandhi with an H thrown in somewhere. Gandhi or something like that. Anyway, it's got Candice Bergen in it and some other people. Yeah, it is, if you really understand what a terrible thing the British Empire did to the country in India, you would realize how great this person is, how courageous he rebelled against the ruling government from outside. We often feel that we had 100 years of humiliation in China ever since the British came to wage the Opium War. We had 100 years of humiliation. I did not remember this term when I was growing up. I think the more I read about it, I think it was some kind of propaganda promoted by the Communist Party to take revenge against the Western power for trampling on us. However, when we compare with India, we could have been a lot worse during that time. The British could invade us and occupy us and maybe impose on a different written language on us, like the French did in Vietnam. They could not read their language, so they changed their language using their Roman alphabet to spell Vietnamese language. And we just managed to escape from this terrible fate. We really lucked out, even though we suffered for a great deal. Okay, that's something.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. See you next time. 谢谢。
谢谢。
Thank you. Bye bye.
再见。
拜，再见。